When one thinks of the Vatican, the magnificence of St. Peter's Basilica, the works of Michelangelo, the Swiss guards with their colorful uniforms, and the Pope looking out from the window immediately come to mind. But behind the spirituality, the liturgy, and the millennia-old history, there exists an incredibly sophisticated economic organization. The Vatican is not only the heart of Christianity, it is also a sovereign state, a diplomatic power, and above all, an entity with a complex and surprisingly modern financial structure. But how does the Vatican really make money? And why doesn't anyone talk about it openly? The Vatican is the smallest independent state in the world, with just 44 hectares of surface area. It has fewer than 1,000 inhabitants, but an economic and political power that surpasses that of many much larger states. It does not have a true productive economy, does not possess natural resources, and has no industries or agriculture. Yet, it manages to finance global works, maintain an enormous administrative machine, and preserve an artistic heritage among the most precious in the world. The main sources of income. 1. Donations and offerings. The main source of income for the Vatican comes from donations.
Now, okay, a lot of you are probably very confused right now, so allow me to explain. And for that, we gotta rewind back to 8th century England.
Every year, millions of faithful around the world contribute with voluntary offerings, both in local churches and through centralized instruments such as the Peter's Pence collection. This is a global collection that has very ancient roots. As early as the 8th century, British Christians sent money to Rome to support the Pope. Today, Peter's Pence has become an international fundraising network, and despite scandals and criticisms, it continues to generate millions of euros each year. But there's more. Every Catholic congregation, every parish, every religious order pays the Vatican a portion of its income. This system of spiritual taxation guarantees the center of ecclesiastical power a continuous flow of resources from every corner of the planet. 2. Real estate and rents. The Vatican is also a real estate giant. According to a confidential report leaked in 2021, it owns more than 5,000 properties in Rome, Paris, London, Geneva, and other key cities. Some of these properties are historic palaces in the very center, rented at market prices to embassies, banks, and multinational corporations. In Rome alone, it is estimated that the Vatican owns about 15% of the properties in the historic center. The Vatican has two main asset managers, APSA, Administration of the Patrimony of the Apostolic See, which manages real estate and movable assets, and the Vatican Pension Fund, which invests to guarantee the pensions of ecclesiastical personnel. Both entities move significant capital, often through external companies to avoid attracting too much attention. 3. Financial investments. Despite appearances, the Vatican is also present in international financial markets. It owns stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and even stakes in private companies. Its investment portfolio is managed by the Institute for Works of Religion, IOR, better known as the Vatican Bank. The IOR administers billions of euros belonging to religious entities, dioceses, and foundations, but also invests on its own behalf. Over the years, the Vatican Bank has been at the center of numerous scandals: money laundering, opaque operations, financing of questionable groups. One of the most famous scandals dates back to the 1980s, when the collapse of Banco Ambrosiano revealed dangerous links between the IOR, Freemasonry, and organized crime. Despite the reforms introduced in recent years to improve transparency, many analysts believe that the system remains extremely opaque even today. 4. Tourism and museums. The Vatican hosts some of the most visited museums in the world. The Vatican museums, with the Sistine Chapel as its crown jewel, attract over 6 million tourists every year. The entrance ticket starts at €17, and considering guided tours, audio guides, souvenir shops, and spontaneous donations, the turnover exceeds €100 million per year. Added to this are publishing sales. The Vatican owns publishing houses, prints newspapers such as L'Osservatore Romano, manages radio and television broadcasters, and sells religious books, Bibles, liturgical objects, souvenirs, coins, and stamps issued by the Vatican State. The latter are particularly sought after by collectors and constitute a surprisingly solid source of income. 5. Agreements with states. Another often ignored item is that of bilateral agreements. The Vatican has diplomatic relations with over 180 states and often signs agreements that provide for economic support or tax breaks. In some cases, it receives direct contributions for the maintenance of the clergy or for the promotion of charitable activities. For example, in Germany there is a mechanism called Kirchensteuer, or church tax, where the state collects a percentage of the income of believing citizens and directly forwards it to the churches, including the Catholic one. A portion of these funds also reaches the Vatican. Expenses. Where does the money go? Faced with these earnings, there are significant expenses. Maintaining the Vatican machine is expensive. Between salaries, pensions, renovations, religious missions, maintenance of artistic heritage, and diplomacy, the Vatican budget absorbs hundreds of millions a year. A 2020 report indicated that the Vatican spent more than it earned, generating a structural deficit. The pandemic has worsened the situation, forcing the Vatican to cut salaries and reduce projects. Yet, despite the difficulties, it always manages to put its accounts in order. How? Simple. With an estimated patrimony of over €10 billion, it has enough assets to cover any shortfalls. Some experts believe that the real patrimony could be much higher, but there are no fully verifiable public official reports. The shadows, scandals, mysteries, and secrets. One cannot talk about the Vatican's money without addressing the dark side of its economy. Over the years, the Vatican has been involved in financial scandals that have cast heavy shadows on its transparency. Becciu case, 2020. Cardinal Angelo Becciu was accused of mismanaging funds from the Secretariat of State, including the purchase of a luxury building in London. The scandal raised questions about how the Vatican invests the money of the faithful. IOR and money laundering. Over the decades, the Institute for Works of Religion has been associated with money laundering operations, anonymous accounts, and links with organized crime. Banco Ambrosiano collapse, 1982. One of the most sensational cases where banker Roberto Calvi was found hanged in London. The connections with the Vatican Bank were the subject of international investigations. Every time a scandal breaks out, the Vatican announces reforms and greater transparency. But many observers point out that internal control remains limited, and that power is still concentrated in a few hands. A spiritual business? The question many ask is the Vatican a spiritual institution or a global enterprise? Technically, it is both. The Catholic Church is a religious entity with an evangelical mission, but the Vatican often acts as a true holding company. It invests, owns real estate, signs treaties, manages human resources, and participates in geopolitical decisions. All this in the name of faith. The difference, however, lies in the fact that there is no public budget like that of modern states. The Pope can decide almost absolutely, and controls are internal, often not very transparent. The risk is that this system generates abuses, but also that the original purposes of the institution are lost sight of. The Vatican remains an enigma, a religious entity without taxes, but with an economic network that touches every continent. It makes money from real estate, museums, financial markets, offerings, diplomatic agreements, and even souvenirs. Yet it preaches evangelical poverty. There are popes who have tried to change things. Francis, for example, has reduced the power of the Curia, dismissed corrupt cardinals, and pushed for greater transparency. But the machine is gigantic, and internal resistance is not lacking. In the end, one thing is certain. Money in the Vatican is not just a tool, it is an integral part of power. An ancient, discreet, and difficult power to decipher, and perhaps precisely for this reason, so fascinating.